Hi, welcome back. We are the Four Storytellers, a group of writers scratching deeper into the fabric of our lives to generate diverse stories and unique characters using our wildly individual and distinct voices. I am Sydney Gilder, the entire amateur of this group, and joining me today is our wonderful dramatist, Del Shores.
Hello.
Our journalist, Nancy J. And our philosopher, Mr. James Grady.
No matter which block I'm in, I'm always last.
Sorry, save the best for last, as they say. In today's episode, sorry, Del. Sorry, I do have favorites. In today's episode, we are talking about pacing, which is something that, as an amateur writer myself, I am struggling with. So I decided to bring it to my three esteemed colleagues to talk it out. Another way that I like to put pacing is to think about it in terms of, well, slutty writing. Yes, slutty writing, as in, as a writer, when you're presenting your story, you're letting everything go up front. You're not, diving into it slowly and revealing things here and there. No, it's like first chapter, bam, 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 bam. And then your book can get kind of slow and sad and boring throughout. So, yes, I am coming to you guys today to help me figure out how to pace my story. And it's a romance novel, so it can be slutty, but it can't be slutty writing.
But let's define pace. What is pacing?
I thought we were going to talk dirty.
Well, I did too. Well,
we can, but we are open.
She got our buy-in on this by calling it slutty writing, and then
slutty writing, and then suddenly we're talking about pace. Okay, let's talk about something legitimate like pace.
How about this? Think about it this way. How do you slowly introduce a sex scene? Please help me build up the pace to a sex scene.
Well, I think it's the same way you do in real life. You start and you work down.
I mean, it really depends on who you ask, right? Because as a gay man, the most common way of doing it is banging it out in the first 5 minutes and then doing romance later.
Oh, okay.
I like to think that maybe if the sex moves the story forward.
You're right. That's why some romance novels open the first chapter as sex and other ones take until like 4 or 5 chapters to get there. It all depends on your mood and what you want to read. But today I really want to talk about how to not let your story lag. What are some tips, tricks? Do you use the story arc, the one that's like exposition, rising action, climax, yada, yada? Do you use the 3-act structure? Do you focus on page count? What do you guys do yourselves when you're reading through something that you were writing or rewriting in the moment and you go, oh, this is slow, this is too fast, these characters are saying something that's way too convenient for the story right now, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Who wants to go? James, you look like you were just itching to just spew something.
And I don't know whether it's just hubris, but I don't tend to think about story arc or narrative structures when I'm setting out in a story. I don't tend to think about those plot points that you have to hit. For me, it's about the psychology, right? Like there are some. And let's talk about your genre, right? There's some romanterotica, as I like to call it, where the psychology of it and the characters work such that you're banging in the first 5 pages, and then the other 200 pages are figuring out how it's going to work. Yeah. And then there are other relationships where like your current character, where it takes a while to work up to it because it wouldn't make sense for her, given her issues, to be engaging in some hardcore action in the first 5 pages. Right. So I think that going back to our discussions about characters, we're very character centered, as our mission statement says. And so for me, it's about understanding what the character would do.
I actually love what you're doing with your character, Sydney, yes. Because there's fantasy involved, which involves masturbation early on, which you can get very graphic in the fantasy of it. But the real sex, you're sort of teasing us and building towards it. And I'm going, come on, when are they going to do it? When are they going to do it? Because
it's the pace.
Well, and sex, of course, sells in Hollywood, but I think in literature, it's a little more nuanced.
Yeah.
We can really lead up to it. I mean, that's because we're reading it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But when you talk about pacing, you know what, I like James, I don't really think that much about it, especially with my first draft. And of course, most of my work before this that I'm writing on right now has not been in the novel form like you and James and Nancy are doing. Mine's more script. But what I do is I overwrite. I always overwrite, and I overtell a story, and I tell more than ultimately you will need. And then when I pare it down, I utilize reading out loud. And I do it. I'm someone who likes an audience, so I will literally read out loud to my friends or to a friend until they get bored with me and say, "Can you choose somebody else?" But I ask, was that part a little slow? And then I'll have a reading in my living room, and I can kind of tell. Back to pacing, with the pacing, if the pacing slows down, and then you go, what in that part that slowed down do I need?
Yeah.
And you extract it and figure out a way to put it in for story point and get rid of. You got to be willing to kill some babies sometimes in your writing. You really do, and it hurts so badly. I know that's a term we use all the time out here, in TV especially. Oh, I got to kill some babies. It sounds awful, but
Democrats.
Guilty. All right. So that's my advice is write, and then pare it down. Edit.
So right now with my writing, because I am stuttering, I am stopping and starting. My first chapter I feel like was really strong because my whole goal was introduction. And then with my second chapter, I wanted to dive in and get readers and the story hooked on to what's going to happen in this book. And I feel like when my first draft of it, the pacing in that chapter wasn't the problem. It was the fact that I was revealing information and diving into things a little too soon for my story throughout to unfold. Yeah. So I think that was where my pacing itself was lacking or in need of help, the unfolding of events.
But what you did so great, and when you came back with the rewrite, because we've all been along for the journey of Sydney's first chapters, is that there was a very, very important aspect of that character that that affects her sex life.
Yeah.
And I loved how you paused and in a beautiful flashback way, we got to know how she got to here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so with that and with my rewrite and what I did, going back and not just rewriting, but incorporating elements to help build your character and build your story, with description, with flashback, with plot structures, I guess you could say, those kind of things with your rewriting to help your pacing move along, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Well, I found like in past writing before I got to this story, I don't know that it's affected this story as much, but I tend to, if there's going to be a relationship in my story, I get straight to it. Like I rush people into those relationships in the first draft. And for me, it's always been a task to go back and do what you've done, which is to, I know I want to get them into that relationship because I want to write them interacting with each other in that way. But then the challenge becomes going back and doing that pacing thing retroactively of getting that build up to them having this relationship with each other. And I think, you managed to kind of get a handle on this very early, and pace it out so that, there's insta lust, but there's not insta love. It's kind of, it's building up in an appropriate fashion. For those of you who are listening to this and haven't already read Sydney's book, you'll one day get to read that and understand what we're talking about.
But I think it's important that what we've gotten, Sydney, and Dell, of course, will concur as well as James will, is staying in character. Your characters, you know them so well and you write them so well that the things that happen and bringing up the sex or the listening or from the walls or falling on each other, whatever, they're still in character.
Yeah.
Mm.
Is that important?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. But what I think that sort of, let's just be honest. It's not like I don't pick up romance novels and read them. I think would Valley of the Dolls be considered a romance novel? Not really, right?
No.
But Candace Bushnell, I've read a couple of her books, and what I love about your lead character and what you've done with her is that we are caring about her so much. And when you first brought her in, she was fun. She was kind of a party girl, and then you went back, and when you started layering in and us getting to know her, I think it's like in real life. I think the sex is going to be more meaningful for all of us. You know her.
Well, I think that's a really good thing that I did with my writing, is understanding not just my character, but my audience. And I guess when I think of my audience, I think of myself. And when it comes to romance novels, as a female, and this is just a general term, not all women, hashtag not all women, but that developing an emotional connection to the main character makes the sex and the erotic of the book come alive. Mm-hmm. Because it helps you put yourself, because that's what we do, whether it's a romance novel or any other genre. We tend to put ourselves into the protagonist's shoes and live the story through them if it's first person. And I think that's what's great about character building and developing that reader protagonist empathy through, like what you always say, layering. Go back and layer. What is missing? What needs to be here? Why is it reading too slow? Why are things too, yes?
Well, I mean, yes, but you don't want to just have gratuitous sex.
Yeah,
I mean, cheapen the sport.
I do.
Okay, well then maybe
gratuitous sex without a buildup, without having purpose to the story.
Oh, we're talking about writing still. Okay.
Yes. Slutty writing, James. Slutty writing.
But it's funny that you just, in our minds when we hear slutty, we think of sex, and yet I understand what you're saying in terms of just trying to, you put it all out there and there it is. But
we as readers, we want to read writing, as romance readers, we want to read writing that's slutty, but we don't want to read slutty writing because then it's not interesting.
I'm going to get you a pillow that says that.
Yes. Our merch is coming out next week, and that's on a t-shirt.
But I think I get it now too, right? Like this idea of slutty writing, which is, I think all of us have kind of taken a look at writing recommendations or suggestions, books like Nancy introduced us to, and so much of them are how to write a lot of words, and that's slutty writing, right? Like focusing on the word count rather than on the quality of what's coming out of your typewriter, right? Portioning out your book. I'm going to have 30% of my book before I get to the first interlude of sexuality, etc. These formulaic approaches to it can be ways of just generating words on pages. And
and I the other day I was having a conversation with a friend who's writing a novel, and my friend was bragging, and I'm hoping so much that the bragging was producing what he was bragging about was he said, I have a goal of writing 6,000 words a day. I'm just writing, and I'm wondering, in my mind is going, I wonder how many are good.
Yeah.
Because you just can't have a goal of writing 6,000 a day. I have a goal of writing for an hour, and if I, on this particular, I write more than 1 hour a day, but on this particular project, I parcel out that time, and then if I go over, good. But I don't sit there and look at, and go word count.
Yeah, like you're writing a paper.
How do you know? Do y'all look at word count when you?
I track how much I've written. I don't set goals based on it. For me, it's just a matter of trying to figure out how much I've done, whether how much cutting I'm going to need to do to get to a length that doesn't tax my reader too much. I know Nancy's probably laughing inside about that, but when I think about like different times, I mean, in September, October, when I was recovering and was really focused on writing a lot, and emotionally I was in the right spot. And so I think I wrote 20,000 good words. But then
in one day?
No, goodness, no, in the month of September.
Oh.
Goodness
I
gracious.
didn't sleep for 3 days.
6,000 a day is a lot of words, right?
That's a lot, and getting 6,000 good words. Now it's look, if you're writing cozy mysteries and your goal is to publish 2 a month, 6,000 words a day is a laudable goal, and nothing against the genre of a cozy mystery, but they have a formula, and you have a certain page number before you get to the murder, and you have a certain page number before you get to the the protagonist getting in trouble, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the kind of writing where you're sort of actually uncovering the meaning that you want to express, creative writing, those 6,000 word days are once in a blue moon.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Like when it comes to word count, just before we, for me, I didn't look at word count at first, but when I started paying attention to it, I realized that I had chapters that were 10 pages long and then chapters that were 30 pages long. And so my word count and checking that helped me, golden word, pace my book. And I was able to, from 2 chapters, make 3.5, because I was able to go in and layer and extend the story and not put so much into one chapter. That's what I use word count for.
And you have a formula, right?
Yeah.
That a certain amount. But I've rather enjoyed books that I thought, wow, this is a long chapter.
Are chapters necessary? Are chapters necessary?
I kind of love chapters. It gives me it just gives me a little place to start and stop.
It depends on the reader and the genre. Like for me, I like to, every morning I read 1 chapter with my cup of coffee. And so that kind of helps with making the story go along.
And for me, it's helpful in terms of dividing up ideas. So I don't focus on page count within chapters. Some of my words, and some of them are 2,500 words, and they're very uneven, but I know when they end, right? Some of them are 1 day, and some of them cover like a month of time. And it's just a matter of like, is this a discrete unit that expresses an idea? And when I move on, and it's another chapter. And I think if I were to look back at my book, I feel rather confident that I would find that was the case.
Yeah.
Well, Nancy, I love the way your book is formatted, because it's like a chapter. And when you're reading your chapters in class, I thought, this is my kind of book. It's like I could just read a chapter or 2 or 3 and be good.
But see, mine is different than everyone's, because each one doesn't really, I call them kind of installments or episodes that doesn't really move the story forward, because each one can stand alone is kind of what my goal is.
Mine's a little bit like that too. Mine are like short stories, all short stories that are connected to tell a rather bigger story. But if you pulled one out and you read it, it could stand alone. But I think what we're discovering here is what we've talked about before, is there are no rules. You can create your own rules in writing. Are there chapters? Do you need chapters? How long do they need to be? Doesn't matter. When you look at, I go back to Carrie, and I love the way Stephen King composed that book, because it was newspaper articles and it was journals, and it was just so interesting to me that he created his own, not brand, because his other books are very different. But
so I think I think it's important that if you are going to go with that convention defying, I'm going to establish my own rules approach, you have to be committed enough to follow the rules that you set for yourself in this work. Right. So don't create expectations for your readers that you're going to defy.
Yeah. And I guess bouncing off of that, if we take slutty writing and turn the topic on its head, as writers, something that I feel like a lot of people do is they burn themselves out with their writing. They dive head first and they get a little slutty and they write. And then they don't pace themselves. They don't discipline themselves with their writing. Like Del, with you commit to an hour a day. And I tried that a little bit with me to figure out my groove of writing. And I found that I wasn't committing quite to it. And so I tried this thing where every day I would focus on the part of the book. Right now I'm rewriting. And so every day I have clean the kiss scene, clean masturbation scene, clean introduction. And then when I start, I know all my cleans. And then when I start writing new material, I'll have, write altercation in hallway, write the next morning, kind of thing. That's what I focus on each day.
Are you saving all those notes? Because someday when you're a very famous writer, we're going to get those notes and we're putting them on eBay. We're going to get rich.
Just for you, Nancy. I'll mail them your way. But so with that, and Del elaborated, what about you, Nancy, and you, James? How do you pace yourselves as writers? Because, the tortoise wins the race. Because the slow and steady. He figured out the pace that helps you win.
That's why James is a lot further along than I.
Well, James is so disciplined. He really is. I mean, he's so prolific and brings in, crazy. He apologizes when he only has 10. Oh, I had such a slow week.
So I kind of do like Del. I tried, I don't say every day. I try to say I'm going to do 10 hours this week. And, that might be 6 hours tomorrow and then 1 hour a few days. But I know myself enough. And I think as a writer, it's important to know yourself. So I have enough of the ADD mentality that I know if I say, you know what, I'm going to sit down and work on this novel 10 hours a week, it's going to break down. And so I'm writing 10 hours a week. I'm going to try to write my main project as much as possible, but I have a side project or two. I wrote that short story that I brought in the other week because I was bored with the story that I was working on, and I needed something else to kind of distract me for a little bit so that I could go back to my main project with a renewed interest. So,
well, that's a good point, James, because I feel like I've given advice and I give it to myself sometimes when you get a little bit stuck and you start burning out, taking a break from the actual writing itself does not mean that you've stopped writing.
Right.
You're still thinking, and thinking is writing. You're still figuring things out. I mean, I don't know about the rest of you. Sometimes when right before I'm going to sleep, that's where I start thinking about my project and ideas come to me, and also when I get up in the morning.
Mine's the shower.
I'm a driving thinker, so as I'm driving, if I have a long drive, I dictate into my phone. I turn on the voice recorder and I just talk.
Yeah, I'm on the spinning bike thinking. Yeah.
Sydney, you said you were in the shower. That's where you get your thoughts?
I mean, that's why I argue with people.
That's why she writes romance novels.
That's exactly what I was thinking, Nancy. We're on the same page for once.
Yeah, it's just you get inspired,
I just write things down on little pieces of paper and scrap paper and envelopes or whatever, and I lose them, and then I try to find them, and it's ridiculous. And I do not write anything until the day of class on Monday. I know.
So we are keeping you accountable. I love that.
I know. But at work, I mean, it's like I know when I'm going to sit down and it all comes out. I mean, I've kind of got all these scraps of paper around me. And if I need a break, I play Candy Crush.
You know what? You're like that. You're like that pot of coffee that's just brewing and brewing. The big ones that brew for a long time at the church. That's Nancy all week long, and then we just serve it up on Monday.
Well, that sounds really nice. Thank you.
You're like that gas station canister of coffee, Nancy, is what he's trying to say.
Gas station.
So I guess something that, if you as a writer know that you need accountability, you need discipline to get you going, then taking a writing class. If that deadline, that homework, really drove you whenever you were in school, or if you're still in school, then take the writing class, because that's helped me. I know it's helped a lot of other people bring in something every week.
And I know the term class may put off some of our listeners. You know, the structure of what we do is not like a class, really. You know, we all bring in our works in progress, and we read and we get feedback. Del, of course, primarily gives a lot of feedback, but our fellow writers give feedback as well. And so, if the idea of a class isn't for you, find a writing group, find a writing buddy.
That's right.
Yes.
A writing buddy. I told this story in class, but years and years ago, when I was working on Daddy Stein, Who's Got the Will, my movie at Propaganda Films, and they were primarily a music video place, and Callie Curry was a producer there who had gotten fired. God, I hope this story is right, and if Callie's watching this and it's wrong, just know that it's Hollywood folklore. But the story was that she was let go, or maybe quit, I'm not sure. And her friend there, Lynn, who was a development person, said, "Listen, you have that great idea. You have that great idea for those two females." It was called Thelma and Thelma at the time, or Thelma and Velma. And she said, this is what you have to write 5 pages and send them to me, fax them to me every day. Fax me 5 pages. And it kept her accountable. And she wrote Thelma and Louise. And Lynn told me, she said, I just kept waiting for it to fall apart, and it never did. And literally, suddenly Scott read it, and we have Thelma and Louise as a classic.
But people do that with exercise and diet. And it's that accountability. It's the partnership. It's someone who's going to be your cheerleader. And make sure that you get it, you're doing something, right?
And don't wait to be inspired. Inspire yourself. Start writing, and the inspiration will come as you're writing. You just make yourself do it. Inspiration is the greatest excuse for not doing shit that ever was invented. Yep. Let me tell you something. When you start working in this town and you have a deadline, fuck inspiration. You have to, there's a paycheck. And that's the inspiration, is the paycheck.
Yeah.
And that deadline.
And Sydney, I think you're recently in college. I recently taught college. I think that one of the great lessons that you learn writing papers for classes, it's not about inspiration. It's about perspiration. You have a deadline. You turn it in. You get a grade. That's right.
Exactly. Yes, I know this very well.
and that then you're really fast paced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Mondays. Yeah.
I think James probably we need to take a break here. James needs a drink.
Yeah,
I am so dry.
Oh my gosh.
So dry now.
Good. No, this is an inspiration to me. Maybe I'll start writing the night before.
Don't change your style. That's the way you do it. It's working. Don't change what's working.
Just contact Patty Pell and tell her that she wants to hear what you have to say on Thursday, and then you'll have 2 days.
Patty's a good buddy.
We'll put Patty in sometime. Find
a buddy, y'all. Find a way to write. If you got a story to tell it.
Yes.
And if you're related to me, make them up. Have a pretend writing buddy.
Pull from your family. Have discipline. All the lessons we've learned today.
Okay.
Until next time, when we will congregate again and talk some more about writing and such.